Historic election shift, center-right Demokraatit Party overthrows anti-American left promises business-focused reforms. On March 13, 2025, a seismic political shift unfolded in the United States with the center-right Demokraatit Party's ascendance leading to the ousting of the long-standing anti-American left. This pivotal moment in American politics marks a reaction to years of discontent among working-class families, particularly towards the Democratic Party's perceived failures in addressing their economic grievances. 1. The election landscape. The 2024 elections saw an unprecedented voter turnout, reflecting a nation on edge. The Demokraatit Party, which has traditionally positioned itself as a centrist alternative, capitalized on the growing frustration among working-class Americans with the left's policies. The party's platform focused on business-oriented reforms aimed at revitalizing the economy, tapping into the sentiments of voters who felt left behind by the previous administration's policies. The Democratic Party, under President Biden, had attempted to implement pro-labor policies including wage increases and job creation initiatives. However, these efforts fell short in the eyes of many voters who felt the party had grown out of touch with their realities. Analysts noted a significant shift in voting patterns, particularly in key industrial states where the Demokraatit Party garnered support by promising a return to economic stability and growth. 2. Political introspection and the Democratic Party's struggles. In the aftermath of the election, political analysts like Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson began dissecting the reasons behind the Democratic Party's diminishing support. They argued that the inefficiency of government operations had alienated many voters. Their proposed abundance agenda sought to reframe the narrative, emphasizing the need for effective governance rather than simply increased spending. The sentiment echoed among party insiders, notably Sherrod Brown, who emphasized the urgent need for the Democratic Party to reclaim its identity as the party of the working class. Brown's comments highlighted a disconnect between the party's messaging and the lived experiences of voters, particularly in manufacturing towns that had long relied on Democratic support. The historical context played a vital role in this introspection. Policies like the North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA) left many voters feeling betrayed, as they perceived the Democratic Party as having prioritized corporate interests over those of the working class. This sentiment fueled the Republican Party's rise, particularly in areas that had once been Democratic strongholds. 3. Economic inequality and discontent. The growing economic inequality in the United States became a focal point of discussion. As corporate profits soared, wages stagnated, and the cost of living continued to rise. Voters expressed their disillusionment with a system they felt was rigged against them. The Demokraatit Party's promise of business-focused reforms aimed to address these concerns by creating an environment conducive to economic growth and job creation. Brown's call for the Democratic Party to embrace its historical roots as a champion for workers resonated with many who felt abandoned by the party. The need for a coherent narrative that emphasized the dignity of labor and economic fairness became central to the party's strategy moving forward. 4. The Demokraatit Party's vision for reform. In the wake of its electoral victory, the Demokraatit Party unveiled a comprehensive reform agenda that sought to revitalize the economy and restore faith in government. This agenda focused on several key areas. Infrastructure investment. Acknowledging the need for improved infrastructure, the party pledged to invest in modernizing roads, bridges, and public transportation systems. This investment aimed to create jobs while addressing the crumbling state of America's infrastructure. Regulatory reform. Recognizing that excessive regulations had hindered economic growth, the Demokraatit Party promised to streamline bureaucratic processes, making it easier for businesses to operate and innovate. Job creation. The party emphasized its commitment to creating jobs through targeted investments in technology and green energy, positioning itself as a leader in the transition to a sustainable economy. Support for working families. Acknowledging the struggles of working-class Americans, the Demokraatit Party committed to policies aimed at improving wages, reducing the cost of living, and expanding access to affordable healthcare and childcare. 5. Implications for future elections. The Demokraatit Party's success in the 2024 elections and its subsequent reform agenda carry significant implications for future elections. Analysts suggest that the party's ability to maintain its momentum will depend on its effectiveness in addressing the root causes of working-class dissatisfaction. The Democratic Party faces a critical juncture in redefining its identity and reconnecting with its traditional base. If the party fails to adapt its narrative and policies to align with the needs of working-class Americans, it risks further alienation from voters who feel their concerns have gone unaddressed. The conversation around the Democratic Party's future echoes the broader themes of economic fairness and the dignity of work. The Demokraatit Party's reforms may serve as a blueprint for other political movements seeking to address the concerns of working-class Americans and restore faith in government. Conclusion. The historic shift brought about by the Demokraatit Party's victory in the 2024 elections represents a pivotal moment in American politics. The party's focus on business-oriented reforms and its commitment to addressing the concerns of working-class Americans signal a potential return to the values that once defined the Democratic Party. As the political landscape continues to evolve, the ability of both parties to adapt to the changing needs and aspirations of voters will shape the future of American governance. The integration of effective governance and economic policies that prioritize the dignity of labor will be crucial as the country navigates the complexities of the 21st century economy. The content reflects a significant political shift in the United States following the 2024 election, where the center-right Demokraatit Party has gained ground against the anti-American left, particularly the Democratic Party. This shift is characterized by a promise of business-focused reforms aimed at addressing the economic struggles of working-class Americans. Here are some counterintuitive insights derived from the analysis. 1. Perception versus reality of party identity. The Democratic Party, historically seen as the champion of the working class, is experiencing a disconnect between its self-identity and public perception. Despite policies under President Biden that were pro-labor, including wage increases and job creation, many voters perceive the party as out of touch, defending elite interests instead of representing the working class. This indicates that actual policies don't always translate to perceived support, suggesting a need for better communication and narrative alignment with voter experiences. 2. Ineffective government versus increased spending. Political analysts argue that the Democrats' reliance on increased spending without ensuring effective governance has alienated voters. The notion that merely increasing funds can solve systemic issues contrasts with the idea that better government efficiency and execution are what people truly desire. This challenges the traditional view that more government funding directly correlates with better outcomes, suggesting that voters prioritize the effectiveness of government interventions over the size of budgets. 3. Cultural arguments over economic interests. The phenomenon where working-class voters support Republican candidates despite policies that may not align with their economic interests, such as anti-union stances, reflects a deeper cultural and identity-based alignment rather than purely economic rationale. This counters the expectation that economic self-interest will always drive voting behavior, revealing the complexity of voter motivations that extend beyond financial considerations. 4. Historical betrayal and long-term sentiment. The enduring impact of historical policies like NAFTA highlights a long-standing sense of betrayal among voters in manufacturing towns. The idea that these voters continue to hold on to grievances from decades ago counters the assumption that electoral sentiments are solely shaped by recent events or policies. It suggests that political parties must address historical grievances and build trust, rather than just focusing on contemporary issues. 5. Demand for a level playing field. The working class desires a government that actively creates a level playing field rather than relying on free market principles to self-correct. This contradicts the neoliberal assumption that free markets naturally lead to equitable outcomes and indicates a significant public appetite for interventionist policies that directly address inequalities. 6. Election messaging misalignment. The emphasis on technical economic achievements without addressing the emotional and narrative aspects of voter experiences has proven ineffective. The assumption that voters prioritize policy details over emotional resonance is challenged by the evidence that voters are often swayed by narratives they relate to on a personal level. This highlights the need for political messaging that resonates emotionally rather than just intellectually. 7. Regulatory frameworks as barriers. The authors argue that government regulations, often viewed as necessary safeguards, can also become barriers to effective governance and service delivery. This perspective complicates the conventional wisdom that more regulations equate to better protections, suggesting that a balance must be struck to ensure that regulations serve their intended purposes without hindering progress. 8. Inequality perception across classes. The narrative that economic anxiety is confined to the working class is challenged by the recognition that even upper-middle-class families feel squeezed by rising costs. This suggests that economic inequality is a broader societal issue that transcends traditional class boundaries, necessitating a more inclusive approach to policy that addresses the concerns of all income levels. 9. Voter engagement and representation. The call for the Democratic Party to reconnect with its working-class roots raises questions about representation within the party. The idea that the party must genuinely listen to and involve working-class voices in decision-making processes counters the notion that elite policymakers can effectively advocate for the working class without first-hand experience of their struggles. 10. Long-term commitment to change. The notion that restoring the party's identity as the party of the working class will require a generational effort challenges the expectation of quick electoral gains. This reflects a deeper understanding that political transformation is not merely about winning elections but involves a sustained commitment to changing narratives and rebuilding trust over time. These counterintuitive insights highlight the complexities of voter behavior. The disconnect between perception and reality in political party identities and the nuanced understanding needed to address the economic and cultural grievances of the electorate. The report on the historic election shift in the United States, where the center-right Demokraatit Party has displaced the anti-American left, surfaces several critical themes and insights that many might overlook. Here's a detailed examination of these elements and their significance. 1. Political introspection and identity crisis of the Democratic Party. One of the report's key themes is the introspection within the Democratic Party regarding its loss of support among working-class families. Notably, political analysts such as Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson argue that the party's failure to connect with voters stems from a perception of government inefficiency rather than insufficient policies. This perspective is significant because it highlights a fundamental disconnect. The party has historically positioned itself as the champion of the working class, yet it is now viewed as defending the status quo that many perceive as increasingly elitist and disconnected from everyday realities. Significance. Understanding this introspection is crucial for grasping the party's potential path forward. A failure to realign its messaging and policies with the needs and experiences of working-class Americans could lead to further alienation and electoral losses. This highlights the importance of narrative and perception in politics, where the effectiveness of policies can be overshadowed by how they are communicated and perceived by the electorate. 2. The Workers' Party narrative. Sherrod Brown's assertion that the Democratic Party must reclaim its identity as the Workers' Party is pivotal. He underscores that the party's historical roots in labor advocacy have been overshadowed by a focus on cultural issues that do not resonate with many working-class voters. His discussions with auto workers illustrate a broader sentiment of betrayal felt by those who once saw the Democratic Party as their ally. Significance. This call to action is not merely rhetorical, it indicates a strategic shift that could redefine the Democratic Party's platform. Emphasizing a return to pro-labor policies could help rebuild trust and support among demographics that have shifted toward the Republican Party. The significance lies in the potential for a reinvigorated focus on economic equity and labor rights to resonate with voters who feel economically marginalized. 3. Impact of NAFTA and Economic Policies. The report delves into the long-standing impacts of policies like NAFTA, which many working-class Americans associate with job losses and economic betrayal. Sherrod Brown's recounting of conversations about NAFTA's legacy reveals deep-seated feelings of disenfranchisement and economic insecurity that have fueled the rise of populism. Significance: acknowledging the historical context of these policies is crucial for understanding modern political shifts. It underscores the necessity for the Democratic Party to critically evaluate past decisions and their consequences on voter loyalty. This historical awareness can inform future policymaking and help the party craft a more appealing narrative for those affected by globalization and corporate policies. 4. Economic inequality and the perception of rigged systems. The report highlights the growing economic disparity and the perception among voters that the economic system is rigged against them. This sentiment is echoed in both sources. Where there is a clear acknowledgement of the disconnect between corporate profits and stagnant wages. The discussion about the dignity of work and the need for economic fairness is central to the narrative. Significance: this focus on economic inequality emphasizes the urgency for the Democratic Party to address systemic issues that contribute to disenfranchisement. Failing to acknowledge and combat perceptions of inequality could alienate voters further as they seek solutions that resonate with their lived experiences. The framing of economic issues as moral imperatives rather than mere policy choices is essential for regaining credibility. 5. The call for effective governance. Klein and Thompson's advocacy for an abundance agenda emphasizes the need for effective governance over increased spending. Their argument centers on the notion that government should be capable of delivering results efficiently, thus restoring faith in public institutions. Significance: this call for better governance rather than merely bigger government is significant because it addresses a core concern among voters about the effectiveness of government. By prioritizing efficiency and accountability, the Democratic Party could potentially regain trust from constituents who feel their needs have been ignored. This approach also highlights the importance of policy implementation as a key factor in electoral success. 6. Narrative building and emotional resonance. The report indicates that beyond policy changes, the Democratic Party needs to develop compelling narratives that resonate emotionally with voters. The political landscape is not solely defined by rational policy debates, it is also about the stories and identities that candidates and parties articulate. Significance: crafting a relatable and inspiring narrative is essential for mobilizing voters. The Democratic Party's ability to connect emotionally with working-class Americans by validating their struggles and aspirations could significantly influence electoral outcomes. This insight points to the need for a shift in strategy that goes beyond policy details to encompass broader themes of hope, resilience, and community. Conclusion. In summary, the report encapsulates a critical moment for the Democratic Party as it navigates the aftermath of a significant electoral defeat. The insights regarding political introspection, the necessity of reclaiming its identity as the Workers' Party, the historical impacts of economic policies, the urgency of addressing inequality, the call for effective governance, and the importance of emotional narratives are vital for understanding the future trajectory of American politics. These themes are significant not only for the Democratic Party's strategy but also for the broader political landscape, as they reflect the evolving concerns and aspirations of a diverse electorate. Recognizing and addressing these overlooked aspects could be key to revitalizing the party and re-establishing its connection with working-class Americans. Here are the 4 most valuable points for in-depth analysis and discussion based on the content provided regarding the historic election shift in the United States involving the center-right Demokraatit Party and the Democratic Party's challenges. 1. Political introspection and the need for effective governance. The election results have prompted a significant need for introspection among Democrats, particularly regarding their failure to connect with working-class voters. Analysts like Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson emphasize that the core issue lies in the inefficiency of government rather than merely a lack of funding or resources. Their proposed abundance agenda advocates for effective governance that prioritizes outcomes over bureaucratic processes. This is crucial as it highlights the necessity for the Democratic Party to not just promise reforms but to ensure that these reforms are implemented efficiently and effectively. The discussion can delve into how governmental inefficiencies have historically impacted voter trust and how addressing these inefficiencies could help the party regain its footing among disenchanted constituencies. 2. Reclaiming the identity of the Democratic Party as the Workers' Party. Sherrod Brown's assertion that the Democratic Party must re-establish itself as the party of the working class speaks to a fundamental identity crisis within the party. This point raises critical questions about the party's alignment with the values of its historical base. Analyzing how the party has drifted from its New Deal roots and examining the socio-economic factors contributing to this shift can provide insights into the party's current struggles. Furthermore, discussions can focus on strategies for re-engaging working-class voters, including the need for policies that emphasize economic fairness and the dignity of labor, as well as the importance of grassroots involvement in shaping party agendas. 3. Economic inequality and perceived betrayal by the Democratic Party. The historical context of policies like NAFTA, which created a sense of betrayal among working-class voters in manufacturing towns, illustrates the long-term ramifications of perceived abandonment by the Democratic Party. The discussion can explore how economic policies have directly affected the livelihoods of voters, particularly those without a four-year college degree. The stark contrast between rising corporate profits and stagnant wages underscores a narrative of economic injustice that resonates deeply with voters. This point invites analysis of the structural changes needed within the economy to address these disparities and how the Democratic Party can effectively communicate a commitment to economic equity. 4. Implications for future elections and the need for a compelling narrative. The implications of the Demokraatit Party's rise and the Democratic Party's struggles are significant for future elections. The need for a coherent and compelling narrative that resonates with the realities of working-class Americans is paramount. The challenge lies not only in formulating effective policies but also in crafting a narrative that connects emotionally with voters. This point encourages discussions on how Democrats can redefine their messaging to regain trust and support, particularly in the face of rising populism and cultural grievances that have been effectively mobilized by opponents. Analyzing successful narratives in political history and their impact on voter engagement can provide valuable lessons for the Democratic Party moving forward. Conclusion. These 4 points encapsulate the complexities of the political landscape following the 2024 election. They highlight the urgent need for the Democratic Party to reflect on its identity, address economic disparities, and develop a narrative that re-engages its core constituents. As the party navigates this critical juncture, these discussions will be vital in shaping its strategy for future elections and restoring its historical role as a champion for working-class Americans. 1. The rise of the conservative movement in the 1980s. In the 1980 election, Ronald Reagan, representing a coalition of conservatives, successfully challenged the prevailing liberalism of the Democratic Party, which had dominated U.S. politics since the New Deal era. Reagan's campaign focused on economic issues and a strong anti-communist stance, appealing to disillusioned working-class voters who felt left behind by the Democratic Party's embrace of social issues over economic concerns. His presidency marked a significant shift towards center-right policies emphasizing tax cuts, deregulation, and a focus on business growth, paralleling the recent shift noted in the Demokraatit Party's rise. 2. The New Labour Party in the UK 1990s. The transformation of the British Labour Party under Tony Blair in the late 1990s is another historical example of a significant political shift. The party rebranded itself as New Labour, distancing itself from traditional socialist policies and embracing a more centrist, business-friendly agenda. This change aimed to attract middle-class voters and address concerns about economic management. leading to a landslide victory in the 1997 general election. Like the Demokraatit Party's recent shift, Labour sought to re-engage disenchanted voters by focusing on economic stability and growth. 3. The populist shift in Eastern European politics post-2008. Following the global financial crisis, many Eastern European countries experienced a political upheaval, with populist parties rising to power by criticizing established parties for their economic mismanagement. These parties often capitalized on public discontent with austerity measures and rising inequality, promoting nationalistic and business-friendly policies. This shift mirrors the Demokraatit Party's recent focus on appealing to working-class voters disillusioned with the traditional left's priorities, highlighting a shared narrative of economic disenfranchisement and a demand for more effective governance. Future outlook: predictions for the center-right Demokraatit Party and the Democratic Party's response. As we move further into the 2020s, the political landscape in the United States is likely to continue evolving significantly due to the recent historic election shift. The center-right Demokraatit Party's ascension, which has promised a business-focused reform agenda, marks a pivotal moment that could reshape the political dynamics for years to come. Below are key predictions regarding the future trajectory of both the Demokraatit Party and the Democratic Party in response to these changes. 1. Continued emphasis on economic revitalization. The Demokraatit Party is expected to focus heavily on economic revitalization through business-friendly policies. This will likely include tax reforms aimed at stimulating growth, deregulation intended to attract investments, and support for small businesses as a means to create jobs. As the party seeks to solidify its support among the working class, it may also introduce initiatives that prioritize job training and retraining programs to address the skills gap in the evolving job market. 2. Shift in the Democratic Party's strategy. In reaction to the Demokraatit Party's rise, the Democratic Party will likely undergo a period of introspection and restructuring. Analysts predict that the Democrats will aim to reclaim their identity as the party of the working class. This may involve a renewed emphasis on labor rights, minimum wage increases, and comprehensive healthcare reforms. Sherrod Brown's call for Democrats to become the Workers' Party is likely to gain traction, leading to a more populist approach that resonates with voters who feel abandoned by the traditional Democratic platform. 3. The role of economic inequality in political discourse. Economic inequality will likely remain at the forefront of political discourse. The Demokraatit Party's policies may highlight the disparities between corporate profits and stagnant wages, which could resonate with disillusioned voters. As the party seeks to present itself as a champion of economic fairness, it may leverage narratives that emphasize the dignity of work and the importance of equitable growth. The Democratic Party in turn will need to address these issues head-on, potentially fostering coalitions with labor unions and grassroots organizations to restore their credibility among working-class voters. 4. The impact of regulatory reforms. The Demokraatit Party's focus on removing regulatory barriers will be crucial for its success. Predictions suggest that if the party can effectively streamline regulations related to housing, healthcare, and education, it could enhance public perceptions of government efficiency and effectiveness. This could lead to a burgeoning economy, potentially positioning the Demokraatit Party favorably in future elections. Conversely, if the Democrats fail to address public concerns around regulation and bureaucracy, they risk further alienation from their base. 5. Cultural and ideological divides. The political landscape is expected to remain deeply polarized. The Demokraatit Party, while focusing on economic issues, may also engage in cultural battles, particularly around immigration and social issues. This could exacerbate existing divides, with both parties attempting to leverage cultural grievances to mobilize their bases. The Democratic Party may need to navigate these cultural waters carefully, ensuring that its messaging does not alienate moderate and independent voters. 6. The 2026 midterm elections. The 2026 midterm elections will serve as a critical test for both parties. The Demokraatit Party will likely aim to consolidate its power by demonstrating tangible improvements in the economy and governance. If successful, they could gain significant seats in Congress, further entrenching their position. The Democratic Party, facing pressure to deliver on economic issues, may seek to rally its base around a platform that emphasizes social justice, healthcare accessibility, and workers' rights. The outcome of these elections will significantly influence the party's strategies leading into the 2028 presidential race. 7. The future of the Democratic Coalition. The Democratic Coalition will likely undergo further transformation as the party seeks to regain lost ground among working-class voters. This may involve a re-evaluation of its alliances, particularly with progressive factions that prioritize climate change and social justice. Finding common ground between these groups and the more centrist elements of the party will be essential for building a unified front. The success of this endeavor will depend on the Democrats' ability to articulate a coherent and compelling vision that addresses the diverse needs of their constituents. 8. The role of technology and innovation. As the economy continues to evolve, both parties will need to grapple with the implications of technological advancements. The Demokraatit Party may prioritize investments in technology and innovation as a means to bolster economic growth, while the Democratic Party could emphasize the need for regulations that ensure these technologies benefit all workers. The approach each party takes will significantly influence their appeal to younger voters who are increasingly concerned about job security in a rapidly changing economy. Conclusion. The political landscape in the United States is poised for substantial changes in the coming years, driven by the center-right Demokraatit Party's business-focused reforms and the Democratic Party's efforts to reconnect with the working class. Both parties will need to navigate a complex web of economic, cultural, and ideological challenges as they seek to define their identities and appeal to an increasingly diverse electorate. The outcomes of these efforts will shape the future of American politics, influencing the direction of policy and governance for generations to come.